Welcome to Teague Talks. On the heels of a fantastic 37th Hunter Conference at the new Signia by Hilton, it was a rousing success. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, those who are in attendance. Thank you, those who for the production and put it on. Today, I want to bring you one of my favorite conversations. Yes, I got to interview Chris Nassetta, very biased there. Chris is fantastic. Everybody loves Chris. So if you didn't get a chance to hear Chris, I thought I'd let you listen to it now. So without further ado, everyone, Chris Nassetta. So I want to talk about a lot of stuff and sort of knowing our audience. I'm gonna start. Maybe I'm gonna channel my inner Mitch Patel, who's front row.
I said to Teague walking out, those of you that have had to listen to me before know that I was semi-serious. He said, we have 45 minutes. And I said, all right, so we'll do 2 questions.
Yeah. There's an over-under bet of how many questions I'll get in. And it's 3 right now.
No, I'm going to give you 5. I'm going to, well,
right, let's see,
how much are we betting? I can, if you make it worth my while.
Dinner,
all right. 5, right. I say 5.
So thank you for being here. Thank you guys for listening. I hope this is fun. I might even take questions, Mitch. He won't answer them. So last time we sat down a year ago, and I'm gonna start small, and then we'll get into global things, and we'll contradict everything David Sachs just said.
I did ask David walking off, I said, were you optimistic or pessimistic before I go out there, just so if I know I'm contrary, on the contrarian side? He said, no, I was optimistic.
So mine is starting small, everyone, and we'll build. But the question seemingly of the industry, you heard it already today on these panels, so I'm gonna ask you. And last time we sat down, we talked about it, but it's that consistent growing pressure between RevPAR, which is not growing, there's pressures on RevPAR, and yet the margins, there's pressure on margins, they're increasing, so the profitability of these hotels are shrinking.
Yep.
And I'm curious as to your take on the future.
Well, by now I'm pretty optimistic in general, but I think in the moment we're in there, while it doesn't feel great, I think there are reasons to be optimistic. You're saying we're going to start small and go big, and I'm maybe going to do small and big and everything at the same time, because I think it's all sort of interconnected and part of the same story. So obviously I don't have to tell, we have a huge representation from the ownership community here, which is why I love this conference. Lots of good friends and owners of ours. I see it's bright lights, but I see a bunch of friends in the audience. And I tell you, listen, I grew up in the ownership side of the business. I spent a lot of my career, as an owner. And so, it's a really tough time if you grew up in that and are experiencing what we're experiencing when you have revenues, sort of anemic same store growth, and you're still in a reasonably high inflationary growth period for expenses. It's simple math. The math is working against you. And honestly, every market's a little bit different. Some markets have sort of bucked the trend, but I'd say broadly in the U.S., at least the last couple of years, COVID was obviously bad. Then we had a kickstart where everything got really good. And then we've gone into what I would say is a pretty good malaise, where you have stubbornly high cost growth against stubbornly low, same-store revenue growth. And so that doesn't feel good. So why, you would say, Chris, that doesn't really sound like a good setup for being optimistic. But let me tell you why I am, in part because I always am, but I do think this is well-founded. Number one, I think there's a bunch of things, and this I'll leave, or maybe later, that we can do both as a company and as an industry to drive greater efficiencies, to be able, even in that kind of environment, to drive margin growth. I think in our system we will drive margin growth this year, because many of you who are working with us know that we put in a program called Program Rise, which is reducing loyalty rates and reducing program fee rates, and if you add it all up, it's 3/4 of a point or a full percentage point margin if you're delivering in the right ways for customer in terms of quality of product and quality of service, with which the majority of the system coming out of the gates is, because we have a fantastic owner community. So that's one thing in an environment like this that's difficult that we can do. By the way, my view is that's a down payment, and we'll get to AI and efficiencies and what it means, for, creating opportunities on the cost side and distribution side, et cetera, which I think are monumentally big. But I've said to my team, that's sort of a down payment. I think there's more that we can do to garner efficiencies in our system, given our scale, that can translate into even more benefits for owners, okay? So in a tough environment, I think I certainly view my job as like leaning in and figuring out, all right, I can't change the macro. I think the macro is changing, and I'm going to come to that. But what I can do and what we can do in the meantime is take advantage of the scale and the things that we know that we think we can do better than anybody else to, like, even in this environment, try and create some opportunity for margin growth. At the same time, and this is that's sort of the starting small. On the big side, I have been saying for the better part of like the last 6 or 9 months, and in many cases on earnings calls and in owner events and owner advisory calls, so many of you in the room have heard it, that I think that there's a big sea change coming in terms of broader economic growth, and the setup over the next several years is going to be very, very different and much, much better, in the sense that you're going to start to see this bifurcated economy come together, where you're going to see not just the K economy where the high end does well, but you're going to see the mid-market start to do really well. You're going to start to see meaningful upticks in same-store growth at the same time that you see inflationary pressures lessening, okay? By the way, that's happening. I know we have the war in Iran, and we can come back and unpack that, but that's all happening, and I've been saying it for 6 or 9 months, again, to some people rolling their eyes, and I'll come back. The reality is we are now seeing it. Like I'm seeing it in every daily data, weekly, monthly, even with the storms, even with the war in Iraq, at least the early day, or Iran, and I guess Iraq, war in the Middle East, everywhere. We are seeing that. What's causing that? What's sort of underneath it? And I think this is, this is the big picture, but I think it's like the most important thing, as I think about it, that we, as we think about the next 2 or 3 years, that we could all think about together, is you have in the United States, you have a lot of noise in the system. Like, there's no two ways about it. The politics are divisive. You can, love or hate our current administration, but there's no way you can get around the fact that there's just a million things going on. It's like overwhelming force everywhere all at once, whether that's, in the geopolitical sense, the macroeconomic sense. It's just sort of a lot to handle for all of us, including me. Like, every day is a new adventure. Having said that, like, my whole attitude in life has been like, lift up above the noise. Like, what's really going on? And if you do lift up above the noise of the day-to-day, here's what's going on, okay? Forget Iran for a moment, and maybe it's a big assumption, but I don't think it's crazy to say that will work itself out over the next 60 days. And I don't think we're going to live in a world where you're going to have elevated oil prices for an extended period of time. There's just, politically, it's unpalatable. The world can't stand it. The world has to come together and figure it out. And it might look ugly and painful for a short period of time, but I think it'll get worked out. That's there's a more complex description of that. So just sort of set that aside. Fundamentally, what is really going on is inflation is structurally coming down. The largest input to inflation is housing costs. Housing costs are on a 2-quarter lag. Talk to anybody in housing, and we're trying to stimulate tons more housing. Housing input is coming down. Inflation is coming down, again, short of a short-term oil shock, which is a one-time adjustment. What does that mean? That means rates are coming down. The new chairman of the Federal Reserve, if he gets approved, is a very, very close friend of mine. I think it's safe to say he believes that, rates need to come down. I mean, I think he's been quite public in that. At the same time, you're in one of the biggest deregulatory environments that we've seen in modern history. You're in a period of time where you have some of the most favorable tax policy that's fixed for the next 3 to 5 years, which is unheard of, that's very business friendly. You have this thing, and I'll come back to the investment, but this AI thing that is going to create one of the greatest productivity booms. There's all sorts of ins and outs, but the thing that, that ultimately drives economic growth, if you look at the last 100 years of American history, are these big productivity booms. We're going to get a huge productivity boom. And we have this massive, most importantly for everybody in this room, the single highest correlation, the highest R squared over time and eternity for growth in hotel rooms is non-residential fixed investment. So what's going on? You have a huge amount of investment that's going on. Everybody's like, where is it? Like, well, I don't see it. It's like, because it takes time. Think about the Biden infrastructure bill, $1.6 trillion, the CHIPS Act, $800 billion. These are huge numbers. Less than 20% of those has even been spent because it takes years to get the money into production and get permitting. But listen, I said this in Washington on stage with a bunch of members of Congress. The one thing Washington does really well when they've legislated money is they spend it. That money's getting spent. It doesn't get like clawed back. And then that's not even taking into account the massive investment that's going on in AI by the big tech companies, AI infrastructure, which is happening in every little town around America in terms of data centers. There are no data centers in it. There is no AI without energy, massive energy investment. And so, like, the reality is those things are hard to deny. They are not going to stop anytime soon. They will stop. By the way, will we overdo AI and build too many data centers, too much energy? I bet we do. But it ain't going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. It's not the way this thing works. There's just too much momentum. And so everybody's been sort of like rolling their eyes at me when I've been saying this, because it's like they don't see it, because it takes time to seep into the system. And while I can't say that I've got months and months and quarters of data, I'm telling you, starting in the fourth quarter of last year and into the first quarter of this year, we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the mid-market. We're seeing it in business travel midweek and our mid-market brands. We're seeing this bifurcation of just the high-end doing well and everything else sort of like flat or down starting to reverse itself. And so what does that mean? If we do our job at Hilton, we're going to do a better job in reducing your load on fees and other things we can do for the reduction in distribution costs and other things we can talk about, Teague, if you want, later. But I'm pretty confident in the next 2 or 3 years, you're also going to be in an environment where inflation is going to come down and top line's going to go up, and you're going to be back making, with a business that has margin growth.
So I think that's great. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'll be happy to come back next year if I'm wrong.
We're writing it down. It's on tape.
Yeah.
We've got it for you.
I'll come back either way.
So that's fantastic to hear, because tomorrow when we sit with all the Wall Street panel session, all they're talking about is the K economy and ultra luxury lifestyle, which is not the
I got it. It's like, I always say to my team, you got to be careful not to fight yesterday's war tomorrow. Like, one thing that always, I've been doing this for longer than I should admit. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years. Like, everybody always thinks, like, it's different this time, and like there'll be no more business travel. It's only going to be leisure. During COVID, nobody's going to travel for meetings and events. Look around. Even with the whole East Coast shut down, there's 1,000 people sitting in here at a meeting event. Things do change. I'm not the guy, the guy that has my head in the sand and like nothing ever changes. But things remain more the same than they change. Over long periods of time, they change. Over short, intermediate periods of time, they change less than people think. And so, like, yeah, leisure's great and the high end's great, but that, if you tilt to all of that, and then when things start to flip around, like my attitude is always, and that's the whole makeup of our portfolio. I have serve any customer for any need they have, anywhere they want to be in the world, and sometimes that feels good in one segment and bad in another, but over long periods of time, in a diversified portfolio, it works out.
So it's been tough. That's great. And I'm going to put you down in the optimistic category because that's who you are. But speaking for our developers in the room.
But we have hard data now that's agreeing with me.
So you
Now,
still
hopefully it keeps flowing. I'm sure you guys all have properties all over the country. I assume you're seeing similar things.
Because as a developer, I'm going to put my hat on, Mitch. It's tough to pencil the deals today, right? Construction costs are up, RevPAR pressure, margin pressure. So it's tough to make the deals pencil. Not saying.
For sure.
So, but you're optimistic.
It'll get easy.
Saying
It'll get easier. I think it's not going to. I mean, listen. To a degree, I know you probably think I would say something different, but than I'm going to say. I think it being a little bit difficult is not a bad thing, right? I mean, when it was really easy in our industry, again, the benefit of doing this for a long time. I mean, we're below 30-year averages in supply growth in the U.S. Right now we're running like 1%, a little bit below 1. The 30-year average is like 2 to 2.25. I mean, you want the industry to be healthy. I can remember in my career where literally supply would get up to 6, 7, sort of like, where it gets so easy, the money is flowing. There's no, there's really no discipline, and typically when that happened, bad things occur, at the tail end of that. So I think it's not a bad thing that there's, the people are more disciplined, they're more discriminating, that we have lower supply numbers. It makes it healthier for all of us that are in this room. I do think it'll get easier for all the reasons I said. I mean, if rates are coming down and cost growth is coming down at a time when top line, same store revenue growth is going up, by definition, the math has to get a bit easier.
And I think it will. What do your numbers show on development side? It's got to show they're down. That's soft. Because I'm making it up.
Ours are up, but that's our brands. I would argue are more financeable than maybe other brands. Our numbers are up a lot, and we've done a lot of conversions. But our new construction starts, which in the United States, which were way down, if you looked at it from at peaks of 19, they were up pretty materially last year, and I think they'll be up pretty materially this year. But I still think, if you look at the overall industry, you're going to be running it in the ones. Like when I look at the data of what we're doing, and you look
think that's okay? The ones are okay.
I think the ones are fine, as long as we're higher than that.
As long as you're getting more than your fair share. As long as you're at 2s plus.
As long as we get an unfair share. No, yeah. I honestly do, but it does have, obviously when things are really easy, we grow faster too. Everybody does. I just think we're better off as an industry with, supply and demand being more in balance in a relative sense makes for a healthier industry. And the healthier industry over the long term makes financing when you want to everything better, right? Because higher beta industry means that when you think about the lending community over the long term, when they see that kind of beta, it makes them more nervous. So us sort of, I wouldn't say we self-regulate, but being sort of disciplined, some self-regulation, and then the markets, sort of limiting what can be done will ultimately be good for everybody. Good for same-store results, good, healthy outcomes long-term for the industry. It will continue to build confidence with the lending community that this is an industry that, where the fundamentals are good, where supply and demand has stayed for an extended period of time, relatively in balance.
I'll agree with that. Although I'm not sure our developers are disciplined. We just like to develop, so we develop. Talk to me about how closely...
Some of that is imposed.
Some of it is self-imposed. How much do you look at things like population growth and even foreign travel?
We look at it a lot. I mean, obviously, population growth is not great, and immigration is down for what's going on. I think I think the latter of those is sort of a moment in time. Inbound international, I was again at this event in DC, was sort of beating the country up. I mean, I've just finished chairing the U.S. Travel Association, but I've been involved in Washington and representing our industry for a long time. And if you go back 30 years ago to now, we've lost half our market share in the world. Half. I mean, that's hundreds of billions of dollars in economic opportunity, millions of jobs that have been lost. And there are a whole bunch of reasons for that. You know, obviously we're all focused a little bit more recently on the fist fight we're having, you know, over trade and tariffs, and particularly with Canada, which has been painful. And Mexico actually has ended up, you know, working out all right, and the numbers are up there. I do think all that will sort of resolve. I think the Canadian thing, USMCA by the end of the summer, I think there'll be some deal. It might ultimately, I was talking with folks in the administration last week, it might get done in a Mexico and Canada deal separately, or one first and then, you know, the other separately rather than together. But I do think something will get done, and I think we'll normalize relations with Canada. We really need to. I think the bigger issue, and I know the ultimate question, so I'll go there in a minute. The bigger issue is just like, why have we lost so much market share, and why are we willing to accept that? And the answer is because there's been, and it's not this administration's fault, it's been happening, you know, for 30 years, and that is that we have not, you know, kept the pace in a competitive world. There, you know, it used to be everybody wanted to come to America, and you didn't have to market America, and it was just like, you know, open the floodgates. But the reality is, there's now a lot of really good competition, and for people in Asia, or in Europe, or in the Middle East, or even Latin America, there are a lot more places they can go that are competitive, new resort destinations that are cheaper and a heck of a lot closer to home. And where, as a result of being closer to home, it's easier, there's less friction in terms of having to cross the border, pay, you know, really expensive fees to get a visa, wait a half a year to get a visa, all the friction that we put in the way. So I think, you know, listen, I'm gonna sort of, as I always have, try and make it my business to keep pounding that and working on that. I think in the end we need Brand USA to be fully funded, and we need to like be marketing America, and then we need to work really hard to set goals and take friction out of the process. Even if we could get halfway back, I mean, we were at 10% market share, we're now at 5. 7.5 would be still probably a couple $100 billion in economic activity and over 1 million jobs, and be good for everybody in this room. So we need to, like, you know, as an industry, you know, we need through many administrations, because it will take time, we need to work hard on that. But I'm not embedded in that question is that going to be like a fatal flaw, that we have no population growth, inbounds stinky, and it doesn't matter all these nice things, Chris, you talk about, the business isn't going to be good? I don't believe that. Economic growth, non-residential fixed investments going to be going on for the reasons we talked about. And we don't have a lot of supply. That's why you want to keep fundamentals of supply and demand relatively in balance. And so as those things are happening, I think we'll be fine. And I think if we can then get some of these other things figured out, like Canada and broader inbound international travel, and trust me, over time, the immigration thing will balance out. I mean, the politics shift back and forth wildly. I think we'll be fine. I don't think any of those are like things that I wake up in the middle of the night that are structural flaws that are going to hold us back as an industry. I think the wins in our sales are too strong.
I'm going to ask you at the end of this when you're running for political office.
Never. Yeah, I can answer it. Never. I'm better. I think I do more good right here in our industry.
I will chair your campaign. But that is my point, that I think you're doing I know you're doing a ton for the industry, and so I guess I want to thank you on behalf of all of us in the room. Thank you for what you're doing, the H&LA people.
The industry, you know, it's funny, I won't name names, but I've had others in the industry sort of like, why do you like, I chaired World WTTC, you know, US travel, like, why do you do it? And, you know, like, how do you find it? I was like, well, I don't have any more time than anybody else, but I genuinely believe like this industry has just given me so much like opportunity, like the opportunity I've had, the people I work with, the places I go, the opportunities I've had to be part of this business and other businesses. Just like as a kid growing up in the industry, I could have never dreamt of the opportunities I've had. And you got to give that back. Like you gotta I want this industry, particularly as I get older, I want it to be healthy for the next generation. I think the opportunities are extraordinary, but you wanna trust but verify. And the way you verify is you work on it. You make sure that where there are risks, where there is uncertainty, if you think you can have impact, you lean in and you pay attention to it and you make the effort because industry deserves it, the next generation deserves it, and I've been so fortunate and frankly lucky to be able to do the things I've done. It's the least I can do is spend time to give it back.
Well, thank you. But I think we would all agree, right? Isn't that why we're all in this industry? I think we would. It's a fun industry. It's got phenomenal people, the best people. We said at the beginning, it's the best business in the world. I think that still resonates. And there's a ton of students here, the next generation getting into the business. I think they're here to learn from all of us. We're here to learn from each other. I see all my friends out there nodding in agreement. I'm totally with you. It's the best business. So give me a motivational speech then. Give me.
I thought I just did.
You did. Give me another one.
What do you want me to do? You need therapy?
Is this still a good business to be in? I do need. Can
you
I
need
lay
therapy?
down on the couch,
Yeah.
please?
You should have. Yeah, these chairs aren't really perfect for that job.
Well, bar stools next time.
Yeah.
Bar stools next time. All right, I'll make you end on the motivational speech about this industry. Let's keep going down. Talk to us the terrible conversation of PIPs and all the stuff. That's clearly the reason I bring it up for everybody before we.
Wow, that's going to be inspirational.
Just real fast. That's not inspiration. We're going to end on the inspiration.
How did we pivot?
Before everybody rolls their
this?
eyes and walks out. The reason is it's clearly an issue between owners because the projects are getting older, and it's a fine line between the brand trying to keep the property fresh. The owner wants to keep it fresh as well.
By the way, I'm kidding. I think it's a great topic to talk about. And again, I grew up. I used to say I spent most of my career as an owner, but now I've been here long enough where it's pretty equally split. But I spent a lot of my career as an owner, and trust me, I get the issues on CapEx and keeping up, and I get it from both sides. You got to be balanced. I mean, on the one hand, if you don't keep the hotels up, you don't have a fighting chance to perform. On the other hand, particularly in an environment where we just talked about, where revenues aren't growing and you're losing margin, it's saying, hey, in that environment, hey, put a bunch of money up. It's painful, right? It's really, really hard and really painful. And we realize that, again, not to sort of pimp the Hilton book, but like our project Rise, we've been working really hard on, one, trying to make sure we're getting the right investment back in the hotels. Because if we're all really honest, during COVID, we were all super lenient. Hilton and all the other big brand companies were super lenient, as we had to be, to help, the whole owner community get through it. But as a result, at least in my experience in the industry, you went through the most protracted period of time I've ever seen of very little investment in hotels, which made sense given the times. And we didn't have a lot of people staying in them. And all of a sudden you do. I mean, coming out of COVID, you had these huge levels of occupancy, and you had a lot of people in, and we were charging them a lot more, because of inflation. And there was a price value sort of problem in the equation. And so you got to invest. You can't go for 5 years, put no money in and think that you can keep brand standards up and keep market shares at the big premiums you've had. So you sort of got to do it. Or, I mean, forgetting it's not people say well, I mean, it's for Hilton. It's not for Hilton. I mean, it's everything we're trying to do is just drive performance for the hotels in the system. That's our only singular goal. But if you don't have the right investment over a longer period of time, eventually, it's going to be like a drip, 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 boom. I mean, eventually it won't happen. So, it's something that that we've been really focused on. Obviously, part of our program was in reducing fee loads was getting through not just CapEx, but if you're, and I'll come back to PIPs, if you're satisfying customers and product and service and the like, then they're happy, then we're happy. And so, that's in fact, we're trying to give people the opportunity by giving margin back to have a little bit more flexibility to invest. The other thing is we're in a very different world now on the amount of data and information we have. In the old world, when you ran these big systems, and I was on the receiving end of it for decades, you have every so many years you do X, and 7 years you do this, 10 you do this, 12 you do this, because you're running these big systems And it's really very difficult to like do a bespoke negotiation on 9,500 assets, right? With 9,500 different ownership groups. So the only way you could really, create the right rhythms was to have some basic, consistency on standards of application of renovations. And by the way, to be honest, I think everybody in the room would have to agree, at least on the, I was giving it and then receiving it too. Owner community wanted that. They wanted to like understand what's the expectation. Like I got to build into my, 5 and 10 year plans, like what your expectations are. So the owner community wanted some definition of that. Well, and that was all good, but we live in a very different world now, right? We're all talking about AI and data and analytics. We have so much more information with which we can make decisions and technology to enable this decision making. So the reality is, maybe it's an extreme, we almost can do it in a bespoke way on every single asset. And so what we're trying to do is take the data we have that is customer-centric about every individual hotel and work with every individual hotel with owners to say, it's not about every 7 and 10 and 12 years you got to do X, Y. It's you've got to keep these things up to standard to keep the customers happy. And here is what the customer is telling you need to do. And so that you can be very precise compared to the old world. Like silly things like equipment in a gym, like you got to replace it every 7 years or whatever, but if it's working and it's fine and nobody's complaining about it, why, right? Or you have to do a major PIP, as part of a change of ownership or relicensing, or just in the normal cycle, but the customer data says that they're perfectly happy with the product and the service and it's performing well, maybe we should say you can kick the can. And so that's what we're doing, okay? We call it smart, we have to brand everything. I think it's called Smart Flex. But I think ultimately the data that I'm looking at, I believe we can reduce the cost across the spectrum, but largely in the limited service brands, of keeping properties up to snuff product-wise by 20 to 25% easily over a span of time. And those are things that we're implementing right now. It's not fantasy world, we're doing it. You guys will be seeing it. We're gonna, as part of relicensing, change of ownership, all of these things, if you're meeting the standards, it used to be you automatically got a PIP and you're gonna do X and new owners gotta do X. We're going to allow a lot more flexibility there and in your normal patterns of renovation, and we're going to enable the discussion and enable you with a lot of data so that we jointly utilize the limited resources we have, because we know they are limited in the ways that most impact the customer, so that we get the job done, but we do it much more efficiently.
All right, I will buy all of that. I think the intentions are spot on. I'm going to change topics on you. I don't know if we have enough time for this topic, but AI, which is the new thing in the world, I think it impacts all of us.
How much time do we have?
I know, we don't have enough.
Maybe.
So
I can do it quick.
We'll attempt. So my.
By the way, you've already gotten past 2 questions.
I know. I feel like I'm winning right now.
Just saying.
Won the bet.
How many are we at? I got 5. I got money on 5. So my
specific question
do a filibuster.
You're hilarious. I'll give you that'll be the end. That way, as you walk out the door when we drop the mic. My specific question is, how is Hilton using AI to help its ownership community and guests and the like? And if you want to put your personal opinions on AI, and I'll take that. I might not argue.
I would say, given the limits of time, there's 3 big buckets that we're focused on, and we're doing huge amounts of work in all of them. I just talked about one, so I'm not going to repeat it.
Yes.
A lot of that is AI enabled. We couldn't have done it 2 or 3 years ago in terms of not just having the data, but the ability to manage the data without utilization of AI. So all the work we're doing on the CapEx side is one way. But I'd say the 3 buckets are just the first is creating efficiency in the system. So we're a big system. There are a lot of things that we do on your behalf as an owner to manage the system, and that you're effectively paying for with program fees and loyalty fees that have required traditionally tons and tons of people, because it's processing of various things. And like everybody, we have opportunities to get a lot more efficient in a lot of those areas. And so it's crawl, walk, run. I mean, the interesting thing about AI in all these areas is, like, you can't, people say, agents will do everything, just put garbage in, garbage out. So you have to transform processes and create the right processes. And if you do that, you can put agents on them and make them very efficient. But there's a whole transformation element that has to go on, which is why you're not going to see all the jobs in the world go away anytime soon. That's one little nugget of what I believe. But we're doing a bunch of things in that regard already. We're doing some, really cool tests with a bunch of the LLMs, Palantir and OpenAI and others, that early days are super cool and fun and that I think will create efficiencies. Why do owners care about that? If we can create, I told you, Rise 1, which is our program and loyalty cost reduction. I think of Rise 2. Rise 1, by the way, is enabled in part by some use of AI, but it's a little bit more blunt force. I think Rise 2, or finding further opportunities to continue to reduce the load on cost structures, both our system costs, but also costs in the hotels will be not entirely, but largely AI enabled. And I think there's really exciting opportunity that everybody in the ownership community should be excited, should be happy about. The second big bucket is distribution. We just launched our Hilton AI planner, so it's live. You can go test it. I mean, it'll evolve. It's, like everything else. Like, it's not perfect, but it's learning and it's getting better. We're working with all the big LLMs, with Gemini. We're working with OpenAI, and you will see our products, ultimately get, our app, an app within an app, and we'll be embedded in those ecosystems. The reason I think you should care about all that is that competition's a good thing. I think there's an opportunity as a result of where this is all going, is there's going to be more competition in that broader environment, if you will, of the internet and OTAs and search. And that is, competition helps create efficiencies and ultimately drives down prices. So I do think there's a real opportunity in the distribution landscape to garner more efficiencies. We have something at our scale that's really powerful, and that is, we have 9,500 hotels in 150 countries. We're the only ones that can control rate, inventory, and availability. None of these LLMs, none of these OTAs, nobody can get it without us, and we know that. So, if you were stupid about, how you were managing your inventory, if you were someone like us, bad things can happen, but we're not. I mean, imagine a world where, if you look at the quality inventory in the United States, my guess is we're well over 20% of the quality inventory in the United States. What LLM that wants to be in the travel vertical has a legitimate chance without 25% of the quality product on their platform? Nobody, right? So ultimately, unlike the OTAs, if you go back 25 years where they divided and conquered and nobody knew what was going on, I think we're all much smarter. I mean, everybody, the owner community is smarter, we're smarter. And so I look at, and then this is a longer conversation, I look at what's going on in AI for distribution as, there's always risks, but I think the risk is if we're not smart, and we will be, I think the opportunity far outweighs the risk of helping bring distribution costs down. And then, which owners should care about? That's just more money at the bottom line, ultimately. And the last bucket, which is important as well, is just better customer experience. That, meaning that there's so much, I call it phygital, connecting the physical and the digital. That's thinking about every element of the customer journey from the time they dream to booking to pre-planning if they do that, to on-stay, to problem resolution, to post-stay. There's so many opportunities with AI and with all the data that we now have to digitize many elements of that experience to do two things. If you're an owner, digitize a lot of things that would have taken a lot of people's time, enable team members with much better information so that they can deliver a better experience much more efficiently, and ultimately make it just a far better customer experience delivered, much more economically. So we are finally in a world where you can mass customize, right? You have gobs of information, which we've always had. The question is, how was it, where was it stored? How did you access it? What could you do to manipulate it and use it in the right ways? And now AI allows us to be able to take this massive data lake of information and utilize it in ways to create great efficiency, but importantly, a better experience. So in the future world, you ought to be able to deliver a far better experience more cost efficiently to customers that will ultimately pay you more because it's a experience that is more in keeping with exactly what they want, because you know exactly what they want and you can deliver a lot of it digitally.
I have a more personal question for you. Sitting here listening to you talk, thinking about you on running around the globe, really, if not Washington, and influencers and talking. I'm curious as to who Chris Nassetta goes to for advice.
Well, I have a lot of bosses. Like, I have a wife and 6 daughters.
Yeah,
so
I bet.
I
bet.
all now grown up. My baby's getting ready to graduate. She's 22 to 32. So I always laugh. It's like when I go to the office, I sometimes feel like I'm the boss. When I go home, I'm nowhere near the boss. I am definitely getting bossed around a lot. But kidding aside, I love my wife and my children, and they are stalwarts.
Keeping you honest.
Well, they keep me honest. They keep me humble. I hope I am humble by nature, but and they, it's like, they're the people that know you the best. Like when you're out of sync and you're a little bit, off the track, those are the people that are most willing to tell you. But I also have a network of mentors. I've been super fortunate over time in my career to have people that took an interest in me, and I built friendships. It started with professional relationships mostly, but turned into friendships. And while I may not work with them day to day anymore like I did over these years, I keep up with them and they keep up with me. And they know me, and I can be like entirely honest with them and vulnerable with them. I think it's always about, like, the truth is, like, we all have insecurities. None of us are perfect. God knows I have both those problems. And it's being able to, like, be honest and vulnerable and really, sort of open yourself up. And that requires very special relationships. So as I said, it starts with family. It's a bunch of very close mentors and friends. And then the reality is, and there's some of them in the room, I work with an incredible group of people, and I've really tried to build a culture at our company, which I think is an extraordinary culture where people can be open, where there can be cognitive dissonance, where we can disagree in agreeable ways. And my senior team and a lot of others, around the world are sounding boards all the time for me on all sorts of different things. And so I, like most everybody in the room, I'm sure, I have, like, depends what's going on and where I am and, what bedevils me at any particular moment. But I've got, like, if I had to write it down, if I had to draw the matrix, I probably could, but it would take me a while. It's just instinctive at this point.
And as we've laughed about together, we don't have hobbies. Okay, maybe we golf and hang out and eat dinner and drink wine with friends. But
I like working.
You're talking about working when you're in
but
those
I'm
dinners at the same time.
I'm not good enough at golf, as some in the room can testify. They're sandbaggers.
Nick,
but
size sandbagger.
Yeah, there are a bunch of sandbaggers in this room.
All right, so I'm teeing you up for a big exit here. You mentioned a bunch of tailwinds that we have. A lot of investment in the U.S., interest rates softening, low supply, Even you said domestic travel that is you think is picking up, business travel group.
It is, not just me. Smith Travel says it too.
So that's my tee up. Is this still a good industry? It's
think
been a tough 5 years. Is it still a good industry?
I think it's a great industry. I mean, I've been doing it for 40 years. I started out plunging toilets at the Capitol Holiday Inn at 4th and C Street in Washington, D.C. I went and got a finance degree. I got out. I was in finance and development. I did do some hotel development early on, but I kept, like, the reality is I did a bunch of different things, office buildings and retail and resi, and I kept coming back to it, not consciously, just subconsciously, because I just always thought, you know, it was an incredible industry with incredible opportunities for upward mobility, incredible complexity that was super intellectually stimulating, and was in an industry that was going to keep growing, not just in the US, but globally, that was an important industry that, you know, that was going to provide a lot of opportunity, not just for me, but for a lot of people. And I don't think any of that's changed. I think you got, like, for better or for worse, it's just the way I think. It's like the same guy that everybody said during COVID. If you go back and look at any clip of me on national TV when people thought I was crazy, and I said, it'll all be fine. It's going to come back, and everybody thought nobody's ever going to travel again. Well, guess what? They did. This industry is great. We go through moments, and they're painful, and I'm not minimizing the pain that the owner community is feeling. As I said, I spent half my career going through those things, going through the Great Recession, going through 9/11, going through periods just like this. And I know it's easy to lose faith, but underneath it is an industry, not just because I love it and you love it, and we all probably in the room love it, but I just think, you know, the reality is the fundamentals are good. People want experiences more than they ever had. They want to travel more than they ever had. And so we are not an industry that goes the way of the horse and buggy. We're an industry, you know, we talk about it at our board, around our board table with a lot of smart people. It's really hard to disintermediate us. Yes. People aren't going to start wearing headsets and going on vacations with VR. It's just not going to happen. I think the biggest risk that we all share is the fundamentals of the industry. I think that what I say to our team is, like, you know, you got to know if all of what I just said and all my optimism is, oh, the economy's coming together, all those things, but really that people want to travel and they want experiences, and we're an integral part of delivering those experiences, then by definition, to me, the biggest risk is we don't do a good job on delivering the experiences. So I think the mistake we can make is don't have good products, don't deliver good service, don't innovate and connect the physical and the digital in ways that are consistent with with elements of everybody's life, day-to-day life, you know, and the ways they live. That's the risk is super manageable. It's just if we choose not to focus on getting the basics right and deliver our customers what they want, you could have a bad outcome. But we're not going to do that.
Ever. Ever, ever, ever.
Never.
Everybody, please help me. Thank you, Chris, for coming to join.
Great.
Thank you for dodging raindrops to get here.
Yes, sir.